Here's something different. What this is an Offenhauser 360 Equa-flow intake manifold. It's for a small block Oldsmobile or a low deck Oldsmobile, whatever the fuck you want to call it. Fits a 260, 307, 330, 350, and a 403. This particular unit's from 1981. These things are pretty weird. They're pretty unique. It's like it's a cross between a dual plane and a single plane. All the runners are on the same level. It's not like a traditional dual plane that has one side higher than the other with runners overlapping each other and shit. This thing, it's divided, but you look down in there, if you can fucking see. It's just one big fucking chamber that connects this whole side. All four of these runners here. And then it's got a divider in the middle, and then it's all four of these are on the same plane. But I guess it was supposed to be the best of both worlds. It's a divided single plane intake manifold. These things are pretty high quality, pretty thick. They got like the meat around the runners here come up pretty high. I had this thing on a 403 I built about 30 years ago. It was a 1977 403 out of a Trans Am that I spotted in a junkyard. Looked like it'd been wrapped around a telephone pole. The car was wasted. 77 Trans Am, looked like a Smokey and the Bandit type, but the car was beyond saving. But I managed to extract the engine out of it. It was already, somebody put a cam and headers and a Edelbrock Performer intake and a 600 Holley and shit on it. So it was somebody's baby. But them fucking 403s, it still had the stock pistons, stock heads on it and shit. And the fucking heads on them things have bigger chambers than a 455, typical 455 head does. A 403 had an 83cc chamber head. Your typical early 70s 455 head, like your G's and J's and shit like that, were 81cc chamber, and then your B's and C's from the late 60s, they were more like 77, 78cc as measured. So pretty much any 455 head has a smaller chamber, anywhere from 3 to 6cc smaller chamber than that 403 head had. The 403 got half-inch head bolts, and the 455s come with 7/16 head bolts. So I took me a pair of fucking, I think they were 73 model J heads. They were on a 455 out of a jet boat. But J heads are considered to be about the shittiest big block Oldsmobile heads among the Oldsmobile aficionados. But they're bigger than a 403 head, bigger ports and valves and shit, and they have smaller chambers than a 403 head. So I had a pair of them, which I still got them. I still got the whole fucking engine disassembled. But I took a pair of them 73 J heads and drilled them out to where they would take a 1/2-inch head bolt and made them fit that 403 block, and then bored the block out to a 4.375 bore, which is like 125 over 454 Chevy size piston and ring. It's 25 over on a 403. So I took it 25 over and used Keith Black Hypereutectic pistons. Pretty good pistons, you know, the old Keith Blacks. They're still around, but they're like minus 6 cc dish in them versus, you know, stock ones are like fucking 26 cc dish. So there's like a 20 cc difference right there. So between those and the J heads were milled down to about 72 cc chamber. So that engine had over 10.5 to 1 compression when it was all done and said. And I used a Lunati, an old 80s grind Lunati Streetmaster cam. I think it was $295 advertised, $245 at 50. I want to say it was about 540 lift, intake and exhaust, and a 108 lobe separation. I used comp cam, adjustable valvetrain, screw-in studs and roller rockers and shit. Used Lunati valve springs, retainers and shit. Bought the push rods from Mondello. Used a Hedman 1 3/4 primary, 3-inch collector headers. This intake, 2-inch spacer, and a 750 Holley double pumper carburetor. Dropped it into a G-body Cutlass with a 3500 10-inch torque converter behind it, 400 turbo, manual valve body, 373 gear, posi track rear end, 8.5 from a Olds 442 early 80s model. But it all went into I guess it was a 78 Cutlass. But I built it to be a daily driver. And I could drive it to the track running on DOT approved M&H Racemaster. I think they were 275 50/15 tire on a 15/8 rim and 15.3s on the front with Volkswagen Beetle type tires. But that car run mid 7s at just over 90 miles per hour in the 8th mile, driving it to the track through the mufflers on street tires, just the way I drove it every single day. And it was a mid 7-second 8th mile car, which would be deep in the 11s in the quarter. And it was windowed main 77403 block. Just looking at that fucking block, kind of scary when I was putting it together. But after I researched them and shit and saw people were getting 550, 600 horse out of them and the blocks were staying together, I went ahead and said fuck it and went for it. Mine made determined by what the car weighed and what it run and shit, it calculated out to about 460 horse, and it stayed together. Ended up breaking a ring on the motherfucker. I think them Keith Black pistons needed more ring gap, needed a lot of ring gap, and I wasn't aware of that at the time. I think a ring jammed up on me and broke the fucking piston. That was the demise of the 403. But I still have it. It's been sitting for decades. Probably about 30 fucking years. But I went and drug it out of its corner a couple days ago and getting ready to transport it. I put it on the build list here for the near future, just for the hell of it. But this old Offenhauser intake, funky as it looks, is actually a damn good piece. It's a 1981. I'll probably stick it back on there. Although this go around, it's got where you can run a quart jet or a Holley, but it's got that right there. I might put a quart jet on it, but if I did, I'd want to chop that out, blend that shit back a little bit on the front here. Knowing what I know now. Or I just throw another fucking plate on there and stick a Holley on it and let it eat. I've had this fucking thing forever. It's when I got it, it was new old stock, which it's a 1981 intake, and I probably got it about 1990. So I've had it a long fucking time myself. But it was a brand new 9-year-old intake when I got it. You don't see these things anymore. They made several intakes for Offenhauser. They made intakes for a lot of weird engines. Engines that be the only game in town. Offenhauser. They made whole badass engines too. 4-cylinder Indy car engines and shit. And made a lot of cool parts back in the day. A lot of people never even heard of them. But Offenhauser 360. Like I said, he called that a 360 Equa-flow. I don't think they've made them in decades. I don't even think Offenhauser exists anymore. I haven't seen a new Offenhauser intake in many decades. So I'm sure the molds went somewhere, but wherever, they allowed to be sitting in a fucking warehouse somewhere collecting dust for the last 30, 40 years. There it is, Offenhauser 360 for Oldsmobile.